So, hello everyone. Welcome to me carving an elephant. This was the biggest project I've done with the wood so far. The block being the starting block was 4 inches by 4 inches by about 6 inches, I think. I don't remember the exact measurements, but that was a very big project that took almost 3 months to do. And I'm really proud of how it turned out, considering the amount of practice I've had with carving so far. So here, right now, you can see me carving the shape of the back and the top of the elephant. I drawn the profile of the elephant before the stream because the block of wood I purchased was longer than I needed for the elephant, so I drew the sketch beforehand so that I could saw it to its correct length before the stream, and it's much easier to be confident about where I'd cut it with the sketch already there, so that I'm sure that I had the proportions right. And I had decided to start with the back because it felt like not the it was the simplest shape of the whole project. So doing it first and doing it accurately first meant that I'd be able to base everything else around that certain portion that I was confident was correct according to the initial sketch. Because then, even when the sketch would no longer be there, the lines that were preserved from the initial carving of the back would still be there to serve as the sketch in a way. That's how I viewed it in the beginning. So this project was split in 12 streams, most of them a bit more than an hour, I think. I didn't check back the exact lengths, but I think that's the vibe I got from at least me working on them. So this is why this video is particularly long compared to my usuals. It's just much denser in content than usual. The way I edited it is that I removed almost all portions that were not actions on the wood. So whenever I stretched my fingers or took a break or talked or pointed on the wood different things, my intentions, I cut out those parts to only keep the cuts, and then that footage was sped up 4 times, which ended us with this video length of 1 hour 25 minutes and something. Normally, I would not have wanted to do this big of a project this soon, but a member of my family wanted to have this elephant made for them, and I wasn't confident that I'd be able to do it with the sizes of woods that I had previously, because the elephant has 2 thin portions, the trunk and the tail, that I felt with my 2x2 blocks I would not be able to do without them breaking. I already had some problems with breaking thin portions, like with the shark, and so I really felt better purchasing a bigger piece of wood for the cause. I believe that this first stream was the hardest we're working on back, because I had not, because working on this specific piece of wood for a long time, near the further along the process I was, the more familiar I was with the method that felt right to carve it, the way to use the tools on it well. And because it was a bigger piece of wood, it was also harder, I feel, to carve. That's my experience with it, at least. My smaller pieces of wood are always much softer to carve than my bigger piece of woods, even if they're the same species of tree. So that first stream was really rough. And I think also I'd pushed myself to do it longer than usual because at that point I'd planned on doing this in, I think, 5 streams. Now I know, completely unrealistic goal, but that was a goal I had, and I I think the goal was, okay, first stream I do the back, second stream I do the underside, third stream I do the front, then the head, then the finish. So 5 streams. That was the plan, but well, I didn't end up doing that. I ended up taking smaller, more reasonable bites out of this project. But the first stream, I didn't think it was that unrealistic, so I pushed myself quite hard to finish the portions I'd assigned myself of then. Of course, it was too much pressure, so even I quickly realized that the time scale I wanted to work on this project was not realistic, so I readjusted my perception of the length of the project fairly quickly, but not on this first stream. The back section here of near the tail, I think it is. I was really working in a steeper angle than anywhere else on the piece so far, and it was really a struggle to remove the wood. I now know what technique I should have used. We will see it much later, but I struggle long and hard in a suboptimal way for this portion. Like, the method I was using was working, but it was messy and inefficient. But well, can't be perfect, and well, I am a beginner after all. There is also parts of the footage that are missing, so to speak, because when I was carving, because it was such a big piece of wood, depending on where I was carving, the wood was in completely different spot, and the knife on the wood also was not centered. So sometimes I was completely off camera carving for fairly long stretches of time. So and now we've passed in what was the second stream, still working on the back. I'd given up working on the back about halfway towards the final phases of the back. So, and it was too hard the way I was doing it, so I decided to just start working on the other side. Specifically here, for the second stream, my goal was to remove everything in between the legs, in between the front legs and the back legs. I meant to keep, I decided early on to keep the legs, the space in between the right front leg and the left front leg, and the same thing on them. And I wanted to keep those portions filled until close to the very end, because I didn't want to have a cylinder that could easily be broken too soon into the process. And here I'm going to use my foresight to say that here I made somewhat of a mistake. When I traced the spot for the legs, I made them as though they were in the center of the body and the elephant was just a blob, so to speak, and not as realistic as I ended up wanting to make them. So it was kind of a struggle to do the shape I wanted in the end, and it's kind of goofy looking, which is not a problem, but could have been better. The fact that I flip-flopped on how detailed and how realistic I wanted this elephant to be made it more of a struggle and more conflicting. Like some parts felt too realistic or too cartoony, or it just wasn't coherent, I guess is the way I want to describe it. It's kind of funny looking back at this footage right now to do this commentary, because here the technique I was using was kind of bad. Because I know now a better way I could have done this. Like, it worked. Basically, I made a line, and then I just used a flat chisel to leverage against that line to remove chunks, and then I also did something like this where I'd just make a groove near the line by chiseling away small sections, and those sections allow then for bigger grips for bigger sections to be removed, and so on and so forth until everything was removed. It wasn't it wasn't that way the whole time for removing the legs, I think, but the method I'd used later on in the process would have been easier to do here for the whole time. It would probably have saved me a lot of headache. But that's why we practice and we try different methods. It's to find the ones that work best for us, and if we don't try different things, we won't improve. So I'm not happy that I struggled, but I am not mad that I struggled. It's part of learning, and well, it is. Now I know that I had a better method, that a better method existed for sure, but then I didn't, and I was still having fun. So it's just with insight that I am able to say that I struggled not for nothing, but that I struggled unnecessarily for this specific portion. One of the thing that was critical for this part of the project, to me at least, was the shape of the thigh and of the front leg, because I was really, really proud of how I'd drawn them. It felt like a really good sketch. So I'd tried to preserve that curve all the way through, so that when I'd be splitting the legs, that curve would be preserved. That I'm currently looking at the finished result, and I can see some of that curve, but not much. I can't really say I've succeeded the way I would have liked to at that point, but I'm still proud of the result. And that's kind of what's important here. And I've already shown it to the person that wanted me to make it, and they're really happy about it, and that's also important. Here you can see another mistake I made. Um, I on the side that I didn't make the sketch, decided to remove a portion of wood that I knew wouldn't be there in the end because I felt like that would give me a better angle to go all the way through on a portion. But looking back on it, again, that's kind of the point of the reason why I'm recording everything, is to be able to look back on the project and reflect on what I could have done better. But looking back, this decision here made it so that when I made the final shape of the legs, the final shape of the body compared to the legs, I was more limited in what I was able to do because I'd made this part too sheer and it was too steep of a cliff. And the legs, because of that, the legs are not quite symmetrical on both sides. There is one side that has particularly pronounced straight portion that is, well, noticeable for me at least because I know I did it and it's something that I realized and was annoying later. But here you can see the technique I'd end up using most of the carving time. Here, making one line and then carving away just a small layer from that line. Like the depth I'd cut for the line, that's the depth of the layer that would be removed. It's not the whole time that was used, but it was used. This technique is one that was really useful for a large portion of the project that really wouldn't have been doable with how I was initially trying to do them with a chisel. It's really dependent on the direction of the grain and the shape I'm trying to do. If it goes with the grain, like here, it's really easy to use a chisel. But if it goes against the grain like the backside, and then it's really annoying to use a chisel, and it's much better to do it layer by layer. And with this, we are now entering the footage from the third stream. There, there I started with finishing part of the legs. There was kind of, well, that's more the shape of the belly, in fact. But here you can really see in action the technique that I maybe should, well, not that I should have found it earlier, but that would have made it easier for the whole, if I'd done it the whole time. Just tracing the line, removing one chip that has the shape of the line I made, removing, and so on and so forth. It was a comfortable loop that was not particularly hard on the hand. It was not really tiresome per se. It was a good way to preserve energy and be fairly precise. Now I did go too deep on some cuts, and so the surface is not exactly smooth. It has a slightly strange dip in places, but it's on the underside. It's not really noticeable or that much of a problem. But that's one thing I should try to look out for when I use this technique, is that when you are carving alongside the line you've traced, you really should be careful that the knife doesn't extend too close to the line, or because then it's possible that accidentally the knife will carve a bit beyond the line, in which case it'll change the angle of the section you're carving, which is, I think, what happened to give me the slightly strange angle on the other side. I am unsure whether I'm explaining myself clearly, but I'm doing my best. It's kind of hard to explain without being able to show examples physically as I'm explaining them. That's just using just the words to explain is really a struggle. But just like with carving, I'll hopefully get better at that with time. I could also try to import some kind of graphics to go with it, but my capacity to edit videos is not nearly there right now. I'm able to use the crop tool, the properties to change the speed, and some minor other functions, but nothing that would allow me to add overlays and graphics and time them with how I'm speaking, and that would really increase the workload way beyond what I'm willing to invest in this project that I'm not really planning on making any money from. Since this channel is mostly a way to keep myself accountable for my art and to have a more clearly defined artistic process. It's not really about money in any way. So I do mostly the bare minimum required for me to be able to do this introspection here. Like, sure, I'm going to try to improve the quality of my videos eventually. Well, not eventually, as I go along. But I'm not... the point isn't really the quality of the videos, to me at least. The point is the artistic process and trying to improve myself. And to prevent myself from throwing away my art. There are plenty of drawings I've done in the past that I've just thrown in the trash for basically no reason. And I didn't want this to happen with woodworking. So, not that I feared it would happen, but it's a worry. But by having a video footage proving that each piece of wood I've ever carved were real, it desensitizes me and discourages me from trying to get rid of them at some point because of some weird shame because I improved too much or something. They exist. I can't erase the fact that they exist, and so it's pointless to try to throw them away. That's kind of the philosophy that this channel forces on me in a way. Other advantages are that since I'm editing these videos and I am commenting on them, that makes me reflect more on the steps I took to carve it than if I just let it sit on the shelf afterwards and just went along my way to do the next one immediately. It forces a more clear and distinct artistic process, which is, I think, what I needed to motivate myself. Because I've had some of my tools to carve wood for a very long time, but I just didn't use them. I didn't have the motivation to do it, so yes, I'd carved a few branches here and there, but nothing really purposeful. And I wanted to change that. Thus, this channel. Though this channel is also for other forms of art, I have not started on them much so far, but eventually I'm going to be painting. I've started to crochet. Plenty of fun stuff planned. So while I was blabbing about and rambling, we've entered at some point the fourth stream footage. Basically, the moment we started working, I started working on the underneath the section underneath the trunk and in front of the front legs. That's when the fourth stream began, basically. Basically, I for a long time, as long as possible, I tried to work only on the profile that had the first sketch, because that was the quote-unquote good side. So this was the one I was most confident that I would be able to do the correct shape. And I felt like the larger the section was with that correct shape, the easier it would be then to turn the 2D sketch into a truly 3D shape. For some reason, it was really hard to say. Because yes, right now it is a 3D shape. There's 3 dimensions. There's depth, but that depth is just the same sketch, just carried over the whole length. So it's not. It's kind of just a projected 2D thing. So, which I tried to keep that way as long as possible before starting to work on the rest of the dimension. I think that was a good idea. It did make it more angular, so at some point I had to do some heavy lifting to make it the correct shape afterwards. And it's still not angular, but it's still somewhat not sharp. I'm not finding the correct word, but it's more blocky. I think blocky is the word I'm looking for. At the end of the project, it was a bit more blocky than I maybe have preferred, but at some point I had to put it down. I didn't want to work on it forever and risk going too far and breaking something and ruining it. So I ended at a spot that I felt was good, and I was comfortable with it staying that way. And for the first stream, that was all that there was. Just the front part here of the leg. And so begins the 5th stream in the series where I was carving this for the 5th session. Now the plan was to work on the section behind the back legs and underneath the tail. The same way I'd done underneath the trunk and in front of the front legs. And if I'm not mistaken, the 6th stream is the one where we'll be starting adding another dimension to this project. Because, well, this was a really long-lasting project, so I'm not... there's a lot to keep track of, and I'm not certain where exactly everything is. It's possible right now that you're hearing some noises of some road noises. I have a new neighbor moving in, and he's moving boxes and stuff outside right now, so that's what those noises are. And probably some automobiles moving around. It's hard to say if my microphone is currently picking those up or not. But here, by the 5th stream, you can see that I fell into a rhythm with the technique to trace the area I needed I wanted to carve and how to do it well. Still somewhat of an angle, not exactly straight, but it was a. I was doing some real good progress real fast, and I was really. At that point, I started becoming more confident about what I was doing in terms of both speed and accuracy. Sometimes it's difficult when you feel like you're able, like though you're able to be accurate, you're not able to go quite as fast as you would want. So it's really good for self-esteem when you're able to go fast and accurate. Fast here being really relative. This was still a project that took probably around 12 hours to make. If we add up all of the stream times together, which I didn't do. I just know that I think most of them were above 1 hour. So since there were 12 of them, it's just easy to do. So say 12 hours, even if it's probably not the correct number. It's close enough to that, I think. You'll sometimes see me pushing down like this to on the wood. That's because it was easier to push down than it is to go it from side to side sometimes, and also it. I also do it mostly for sections that are not less important but less likely to be messed up by just going at it more roughly. It's also because it's easier to remove materials when there is a thinner portion to remove. So by doing it on a different direction, I was allowing myself more flexibility. And here I'm using a chisel to I'm just cutting away part of the front because I realized then that I didn't make a straight line, quite a straight enough line with the carving I'd done on the fourth stream. So here I'm correcting that with another pass. You're probably going to be hearing clicks every now and then in this video because it's 1 hour long. I'm cutting the mic in places that in the time it takes is me to drink some water and wait for a moment where I have things to say to pop up. And when I do that, I need to click the mouse to mute or unmute my mic. But I will try to remove those moments, but they're probably hard to spot in the whole hour long uh, video. So it's probable that I'm going to miss one or two click here and there. If I'm going to have to look. I have the feeling they'll be really hard to find and remove. So I'll do my best, but I can't promise anything. Sorry about that in advance. And with this sketch, we are entering the sixth stream. The first one where some 3D element is included. In this stream, basically, I was carving away the back of the legs of the elephant, but I was leaving a some material on the back for the tail to be carved later. So this stream is the first time where the sketch is not all the way through. It's partial. I do believe that in the sixth session that we're now seeing, I did only one side of the elephant, the one I already done the sketch on. And on the second stream, the seventh session, I'd transferred the sketch from the first face to the other side, so that I could replicate the same shape as much as possible. The way I transferred the sketch basically was that I placed the portion I had already carved on a piece of paper, traced the shape of the elephant, then I cut out that shape, placed it on the second side, and traced my tracing. So a copy of a copy, which is far from ideal. A lot of definition is lost, and it's not exactly the same thing, but it did the job well for my purposes. In all of this, both sides are never fully symmetrical, for the simple fact that it's currently impossible for me to be able to do things symmetrically. Both sides of the wood don't have nearly the same way to work, because I don't have the same angle on the part I want to cut. I don't have the same energy levels. Maybe I don't have the sketch is not transferred well, or things like that. It's kind of impossible for my current skill level to be able to have symmetry. But that's not a problem. It's mostly important that it looks vaguely symmetrical from the front, because that's the angle it's most likely going to be looked at the most. And well, basically the only angle where it will be often seen, where both sides will be seen often. So it doesn't matter if when you look at solely from the left, it's not the same as when you look at solely from the right. As long as from the front it looks as if the left and the right are about the same thing, that's fine. One slight mistake I realized I'd made partly through carving the area for the tail is that here, when I traced the position of the tail, I didn't center it correctly. It was offset on one side, I'm not sure right now. I tried to center it basing myself on the position of the legs, but I misplaced it. So I later had to rework the way I was going to do the tail. The initial plan was to have it offset and raised from the rest of the body, but it ended up being the way I fixed it in the end was that I just made it closer to the body than it was initially. Here where we've reached the 7th stream, the one where I transferred the sketch from one side to the other. And I start working on the back of the legs, the back of the back leg. I know I ramble a lot in this video, and probably in other videos, but I don't do multiple takes. The only thing that will make me cut the recording fully and start again later is if my recording software or my computer or something freezes for a time and makes me lose my spot. So then I cut, put the video in, and start the recording back up in multiple takes. But if there's a portion where I misspoke, well, unless I said something really heinous for some mysterious reason that really shouldn't happen. Unless I said something really wrong, I'm not going to be cutting any audio out. So basically, when I'm commenting this video, it's basically me reacting along to. I have the footage playing on one monitor, and the recording software opened for me to record my audio on the other one. I make sure that I make sure that the start of my recording is synced, and then that's pretty much the audio check I make. I do a spot check to make sure that the audio doesn't sound garbled anywhere. But then that's pretty much it. Not for this video. This video I'm going to try to find the clicks and remove them. I've been thinking about it, and I think they should be fairly easy to find finally, because the clicks will always be near a period of silence, and the audio file, when dragged into the editing software, there's the bar graph that shows the sound's intensity, or I'm not sure what that shows exactly, but the zones that will be empty will always be near a place where I clicked. So I'm going to be able to use that to spot the clicks, I think. So my previous apology may have been for naught. We'll see. I just realized that I don't think I explained well why I don't do second takes. I just said that I don't take them, but it's mostly because I perceive this moment as a time to look back on how I did and it, introspection, and it's much more honest towards me and my memory of the project if I don't try to make myself sound better with multiple takes. It's not that I don't want to sound good, it's just that I want to sound good more naturally. I don't want to force it and not tarnish my image. That's not at all what. That's too intense a word, too grandiose a word, but I don't want it to feel artificial to me, if that makes sense. The art is honest, so the voice behind it should be honest, as considering the voice is part of the artistic process in my mind, if that makes sense. This already feels like a much better explanation of my thoughts on my method of recording these videos. Normally, I wouldn't talk that much about the way I make videos, but there's so much free time here in this specific one that it feels like a good time to talk about philosophy a bit. I don't want there to be too much dead silence inside the video because I'm not going to be adding any music to this. It's just not needed, I feel like. So, not that it's not needed, it's just it would be troublesome with potential copyright, and it would be a lot more management than I want. So, filling the void with talking about the way I think about this challenge feels like a good thing to do. And now this. Oh yeah, I'm starting to do the shape of the body. I'm tracing the side of the body, what shape I want it to have, and I start removing it with a chisel. This is mostly a rough pass. I ended up reworking both sides quite a bit after this project, after this section of the project, which is in the 8th session, the 8th stream. And here I remove a portion of the tail, the portion that was not symmetrical but that I'd initially drawn. And the overhang that remains is where I'm going to carve the final tail, because that portion is centered, unlike the initial carving. Here at some point you'll see me add a glove to the end that holds the chisel. I normally don't wear it on that hand because it feels safe and away from the knife, and I don't feel like I need it. But here, when I was doing these long strips of wood removed in one pass, sometimes the bit of wood would end up poking my finger, and I started to worry that I'd get splinters on my finger. So I end up at some point wearing gloves on both hands. Speaking of gloves, they're a must-have for carving. In this project, I often is not the right word, but it happened a few times where I poked my finger with a knife accidentally, and I never cut myself because I had anti-cut gloves, which are there for that specific purpose. But it would have been messy. Well, no, I don't know how bad the cuts would have been, but considering how well those knives cut wood, I'm kind of scared about how well they'd be able to poke through my skin and draw blood. So, a very good purchase when I started trying to want to carve frequently. And well, I knew it was needed because in the attempts at carving that I'd made before I started this channel, uh, I every single project I'd made would be stained with blood in a way. It's well, no, not stained with blood. That's almost as if I'm saying that I cut myself and the whole piece was red. No, there'd be small dots of red in places, or because I'd made small scrapes and cuts on my fingers accidentally while working. It's not nearly as bad as I make it sound. But on YouTube, I'd be worried about that breaking some kind of terms of services, or I really didn't want that to be a possibility, so the gloves were a good idea there. It's those long strips on that side that were really the problem with for splinters, because as you can see, I'm doing some much larger, much rougher cuts on that side, and that's because the block of wood I'd chosen was too wide for the elephant I was going to make. So the elephant was drawn off-centered, so that one side would be near the edge and the other side would be there would be kind of gap. So here, those big rough cuts with a chisel are there to equalize that, to remove the gap that I'd left in the wood. I would probably have needed a piece of wood that's 3x4 by whatever length it was, I think 6, if I wanted to not have to waste that much wood. But I'll waste. I don't know. I didn't like the fact that I had that thick of a portion that was just left chiseled away. But it's really hard to tell when purchasing wood just how much you're going to be using it. And since the initial idea was to make it more cartoonish, making it centered would have been the initial idea, but I changed, as I was saying earlier, I changed my mind a few times on the level of realism I wanted this elephant to have. So that's one of the reasons why this portion of wood was wasted, in a way. And there was a transition here from the 8th stream to the 9th. With that, only 3 more sections to go. I'll see about maybe adding this chapters, this video, for each section, so that they will be more obvious, and maybe I'll be, if I want to eventually, I'll be having an easier time trying to refer myself back to how what part worked well. We'll see. It wouldn't be that much of an issue, I think, for me to add chapters and automatic movements, because the way I edited this video, which each section being done separately and pasted into the same file, well, each chapter has its own block within the editing software, so it will be very easy for me to have the exact timestamps to add the chapters. So I don't really see why I wouldn't add those timestamps. Along with shaping the body, I have to start shaping the legs, because that's kind of where I started regretting the way I'd drawn the sketch of the legs on the other side, because the center of the legs were too far from the edge for me to be able to do thighs quite as thick as I would have liked them to be, and the shape of the leg was kind of wonky. But again, that's a minor issue. but something to watch out for next time I try something like this. Speaking about doing multiple takes, it's probably going to be a necessity going forward on videos that long. I'm starting to have a sore throat from speaking that much in such a short period of time, so maybe not doing takes, but at least splitting the recording of the voiceover in multiple sections. That would be a wise idea for the future, because this is kind of torture. But I already kind of swore to myself that this video would come out today, so I kind of have to sit through it. Well, I'm being dramatic here. It's not. It's a throat ache. It's not the end of the world. It's not. Torture is a very strong word for the little amount of pain I'm in. But as it goes, don't think I'm going to have much more to say. I still pop in every now and then when I think of something, but at this point it's pretty obvious from just looking what exactly I'm trying to do. So unless I think that changes, I'm probably going to stick to just, I don't know, announcing the changes of the videos, the changes and what stream we're at and what the plan was for that stream. Speaking of, I'm seeing a change in stream coming in a few moments. And with that, we are on the 10th stream. Here, the goal was to do a very rough shape of the head. Because the plan, the idea was that everything up to this point was rough work. It was not final. No surface was final. Because the shape of the head would dictate how the shape and proportions of the head would dictate how I would rework the rest of the body. Within some limits, I didn't want to, like the legs were too far gone to be able to be adjusted, so I had to be careful then that at least the head was proportionally vaguely correct from with how the legs were made. But the shape of the body, the shape of the tail and things like that, all that was subject to change. The section I decided to shape of the head right now was mostly to ensure that there was a transition from the head to the body that was vaguely smooth. And also I needed to preserve plenty of materials to be able to do the trunk comfortably, which worked well, by the way. And then stream after that was more about refining the shape of the head, making the shape of the ears, and starting to work on the neck, with the final stream being detail work and refinement of every other shape. But we're getting out ahead of ourselves here, so I'm going to stop speaking for now. Here, there's something I think is interesting. You can see me making those grooves in the middle of the surface I'm working on. That's because that gives me a step that is really easy then to work around and widen to remove a lot of material fairly quickly. So it's a technique that I started using more and more as the project went on. It really was useful for our purposes. And by pointing it like that, making small triangles, it was fairly easy to go right up to the line carefully, step by step, and not go too far. It was good for both efficiency and for precision, which really was a godsend, is how I would describe it. Not really, I did find it on my own, but while working, but I've been really, it really was a very good technique, I feel like. And with that, we are entering the 11th stream. So here I'm tracing the area that I want the ears to occupy. And I smooth part of the shear hedge that was made in the last section in order to have a nicer transition from the body to the head. And then I start shaping the top of the head and the ears. I don't think I have much else to say about that right now, so let's leave it at that for now. The position I chose here for the depth of the ears from the front of the face, I chose that by looking at where the top of the head was, according to the same surface I'd carved on the very first stream, the top, which had the best surface so far. That the top of the head from that sketch is what I chose as the depth and more or less the width of the ears. I felt like that gave me enough room and thickness that I didn't fear breaking anything, but was close enough to the body that I was able to immediately transition into a neck that didn't have to be that deep for it to be pronounced because it was hidden by the ears in a way. So that's the process I chose for where to place the ears. And well, much of this process was sadly off camera or very near to the edge of the footage, so quite a bit of it is lost, or the process is lost here. But I did basically the same technique I'd used to do the rest of the shape of the head, so it's nothing I haven't explained already, I think. I rambled so much in this video that I'm currently unsure what I did or didn't explain. But yeah. You may be noticing that I'm not following at all the first sketch of the head that was there since the very beginning. Never was happy about the first sketch of the head I'd made. I'm not sure why, it just didn't feel right. So I disregarded it and drew another sketch somewhere at the beginning of this 11th session. So it was a good reference for when I was starting to place the legs, but not a good one for this part of the project. And you may notice that the first sketch had tusks. Those were I ended up choosing not to do tusks. That I felt like the trunk was sufficient for it to be recognizable as an elephant, and I was pretty sure that I wouldn't be able to make tusks thick enough and with the correct shape so that they wouldn't break. So I just axed that part of the plan. And yeah. Here, this specific portion was kind of a struggle. I was trying to give the head some shape, the face some shape. I didn't want it to be flat. First, because it would be very boring, but also because it would, I don't know, it would look strange. So I worked to add some form to it. So the tip of the trunk was made to be the furthest point from the front, and then a dip for the bottom of the head, and another dip for the eye sockets. I wanted there to be a slight A slight dip, a slight caved out portion for the eye sockets. And that gave some nice geometry and feel to it, I thought. And still think. But because it was on against the grain at the very front of the head, it was a struggle doing this portion with the correct shape. Still fun, but kind of a struggle. And here is finally the moment where I start working on the play part that scared me the most, the trunk. Because a trunk is as important as it is for an elephant, it's kind of the distinctive feature, I feel like, other than the ears maybe. I really didn't want to risk breaking the trunk, so I put it off as much as I possibly could. I did it well, I think, but I really was scared of breaking it from that point on. So whenever I would carve the area around the tail, I'd always make sure that I was holding the elephant in such a way that the trunk was never touching the table. I didn't want to risk me putting my strength on the trunk and it breaking off, which would be really, really tragic. At that point, I had hours and hours sunk into the project, so a failure there would have really sucked really bad. But that didn't happen. In this project, nothing important ever broke. All of the legs are there, the trunk is there. The tail is a bit shorter than I intended it to be. It broke at a spot I'll point out later if I didn't edit out too much. So, and with that here, we are at the final section and the final stream of this project, the 12th one. I started it by rounding off sheer edges that were caused by the process I chose, the order I chose carving. So I wanted them to not be nearly as sharp, so I made a few passes on each sharp edge to make them more round-ish. And I worked to make the area behind the ears deeper in order to try to have a more pronounced neck. And here I'm trying to make the curve of the sides of the body be about symmetrical when I'm looking at them from the front, which worked pretty well. And it was fairly easy to do once I had the head there to use as an anchor and as a setter of proportion. And I did look quite a bit at pictures for a bit later in this project for the body to have folds and not folds, but to have a more defined look. I didn't want it to be just a cylinder. That would be boring. That would be kind of too cartoonish for the look I ended up wanting to go with. So at some point, not here, I'm going to point it out. So at some point I look at pictures to do the shape of the body more justice. But right now the point is mostly just some symmetry. And for the neck to be more pronounced. I felt the way I deepened the neck felt really good. I kind of just went from the bottom to the top, twisting the knife and stopping by the ears every time. It felt, it gave a really nice shape, I think, and it felt good to do. For just how far I did take the neck, I chose a dip that was in the initial sketch and in the first streams, first sections carving. I start, I just matched the neck depth everywhere, and here is where I'd looked at the pictures on my phone of the first reference pictures I'd taken for this project. I looked at them again so that I would know what to do, how to match the body's sides with what I'd drawn and carved on top. So I followed the central dip towards the center of the sides and added some folds around the legs, some depth there for a more pronounced belly. And I think elephants have that gap to allow for the full range of motion from the legs or something. I can't pretend to be an expert, but that's how I understood it looking at it. It really is about time it ends for this recording session. I'm really starting to slur my words. And here is where I started working on the legs, removing the material in between them. I feel like I did it well there. I was always trying while doing that to never put any energy onto the legs themselves. I didn't want to risk breaking them. They were starting to be thin and vulnerable, so I always tried to direct force away from the legs and not on them. I was careful not to leverage my knife on the part that I wanted to keep here of the legs. And for the back legs, I also had to try to preserve a section of the tail because I wanted the tail to overhang somewhat between the legs, which did do, but not nearly as long as I would have liked it to. Because at some point during the process here of trying to carve in between the leg but preserve the tail, I broke a section. I'm unsure if it's going to be visible. I think I remember that during editing, I removed part of that section. I was pretty liberal in removing parts of the section because a lot of the knife cuts were too minor, so in time lapse it would look strange, and so a lot here has been cut, perhaps excessively. But I knew the video would be very long anyway, so I don't want to keep too much fluff. so to speak. And here I'm rounding off the legs so that they're not square, so that they're more cylindrical and more have a more pleasing shape. That sounds gross. And I did this always from the bottom of the legs towards the top of the legs, so always from top to bottom in the way I was orienting the wood, because I felt like the worst that could happen if my knife caught weirdly on the wood in this direction would be that I remove a bit of a smaller chunk, or that it would stop. But in the other direction, I fear that if the knife caught the wood strangely, it would decapitate that leg. So I was very careful about the direction I was working here, out of fear of breaking the legs, which would have been a tragedy on the scale of losing a trunk. Maybe a bit less problematic. I probably could have glued a leg back together better than I could have glued back the trunk. Hard to say. Neither happened, which I'm really glad for, and I wouldn't want to test it. So I'm just going to be happy that I succeeded in not breaking it. And here the eyes. I regret doing the eyes. They look kind of strange and not gaping, but they're rough. They're rough. I probably should have left them more suggested by the dip I'd made, rather than carve them fully. And for the tail, it was a simple story. Draw the shape, remove the wood around the shape, and then round it off slightly. It was a really simple tail. I didn't do anything crazy here. And I didn't care much because I expect this elephant to be placed on a shelf somewhere and be left there to see from the front, so that the tail looks maybe simpler than the rest and a bit too wonky perhaps is not really an issue. And with that, we're rapidly nearing the point where the video is going to be ending. I'm going to be saying sorry about rambling so much. I had so much time to ramble in this video that it was mostly unavoidable. But here I stop working on the shapes because it's done and I don't want to risk breaking it. And this is the final result. A beautiful little, it's relative, it's the biggest work I've made, but it's a good looking elephant to be shipped to my family. So with that, thank you for watching. Feel free to go by whenever you want. Bye.